Hezbollah launched more than 220 rockets and missiles into Israeli airspace Wednesday, some making an impact on civilian communities. An Israeli couple walking their dogs in Kiryat Shmona was killed in one missile attack. Meanwhile, for the first time in 50 days, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, surrounded by top officials, talked with President Biden in a call lasting almost an hour Wednesday. Biden reportedly told Netanyahu the U.S. cannot and will not see Lebanon turned into another Gaza. But the White House did put the blame for this war on Hezbollah.
For over a year, if you think about what has occurred for over a year, you've seen Hezbollah has attacked Israel and rejected all off-ramps to this conflict. That's what you've seen. The suffering we are seeing in Lebanon could have been avoided if Hezbollah would have stopped its rockets attacks on Israel.
The State Department pointing out that for nearly 2 decades, the terror group has not fulfilled Lebanon's pledge to the United Nations to disarm terror groups and stay miles away from Israel's border.
Hezbollah was supposed to put down its arms, and it was supposed to withdraw beyond the Litani River. And over the 18 years since that resolution was implemented, they refused to do either of those things.
The Iranian-backed proxy army has also been attacking Israel on a near-daily basis since October 8th.
Hezbollah has fired more than 12,000 rockets, missiles, and UAVs at Israel.
For now, the U.S. is backing Israeli efforts to wipe out Hezbollah's ability to attack the Jewish state. As for Israel's pledged response to Iran for last week's attack with more than 180 missiles, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant issued a stark threat to the regime.
Our attack will be lethal, precise, and above all surprising. They will not understand what happened and how it happened.
In Gaza, after months of silence, Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar has resurfaced to seek guarantees for his own life. According to the Jewish news syndicate, Sinwar is exploring the possibility of receiving immunity in any ceasefire for hostages deal. At the same time, the terror leader is reportedly calling on terror groups to revive suicide bombings against targets in Israel. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
I want to continue now with CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, who joins us. So, Chris, Yahya Sinwar has been public enemy #1 for Israel in its war against Hamas. How will they respond to his demands, and what do we know about his whereabouts?
Well, we know his whereabouts likely some in one of those tunnels inside Gaza. The speculation in times past has been Khan Yunis, one of the biggest cities there in Gaza. We had been in one of those tunnels several months ago and saw how extensive they are and how well built they are. I think one thing that Sinwar is apparently asking for his own livelihood, his own safety and security, that he could survive this war. And if they, for exchange for his survival, released all of the hostages, I think that would be something that Israel would agree to. The hostages, 101 now, we know several of those, maybe a few dozen of those, tragically are dead. But Israel has been praying, has been seeking, has been negotiating to try to get their bodies back, or those ones that are still alive. So I think they would agree to that. And Yahya Sinwar would likely be a wanted man for the rest of his life if he ever does get out of the Gaza Strip.
Does Israel intend to keep up the pressure on Hezbollah until they're basically no longer a threat?
I believe they do. I think they'll have to achieve one of their official goals of the war, which is to drive Hezbollah or any other militia out of that zone from the blue line, the Israeli-Lebanese border, all the way up to the Litani River. That's their official goal. What that will do will enable them to get the more than 60,000 and probably likely maybe as many as 100,000 Israelis back to their homes and their livelihoods after more than a year of being away. So I think they're going to go, and I can continue to pursue Hezbollah that it's no longer a threat. I think that's what they're going to be going to do.
Chris, Israel is also promising a swift and surprising response to Iran for its recent attack. What kind of speculation has there been about how Israel might strike back?
Well, the speculation had been, well, originally that possibly they would go after the nuclear sites, but apparently now the speculation is that they won't go after the nuclear sites, but go after military installations, intelligence units, maybe some of the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. It remains to be seen. But as Yoav Gallant said, the defense minister for Israel, it's going to be precise. It's going to be surprising. And given the fact of what Israel has done in the last several weeks, especially with the beeper attack, that was just an unprecedented way to literally disable thousands of Hezbollah fighters. There could be a surprise in what Israel's going to do. They're going to meet later today, the cabinet in Israel, and they're going to vote on what they're going to do with Iran.
Jews will be celebrating the high holy holiday of Yom Kippur tomorrow. Tell us more about this day and this season.
Well, this is the Day of Atonement. This is a biblical command, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. It's preceded 10 days earlier than that by Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. And in between those two holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, they call it the 10 days of awe. And during this time, Jews are commanded to make restitution, to make sure their lives are right. There's a saying there called Gima Hatima Tova. May you be inscribed, have a good inscription in the book of life. So that's what they do. There's been tens of thousands of people at the Western Wall crying out for forgiveness on Yom Kippur, and I've never experienced this in any other country from when I've been there. Literally, the country basically shuts down completely. Certainly not emergency services of the IDF, but really you could walk down the streets of most any city. People go to the synagogues. They also fast for 25 hours. And so it's a very, very holy day coming up for the Jewish people.
Since the October 7th attacks last year, have many Israelis drawn closer to God, and how can we be praying for them right now?
They really have. If you look back to a Jerusalem Post poll, many Jews and Israelis have come closer to God because of what happened on October 7th. And the way people can be praying for them, it's been such a traumatic, difficult day, probably a difficult year, probably the worst since the Holocaust. Pray for their comfort. Pray that they would be healed from the emotional trauma, the physical trauma, and also all the things that happened during the war economically and certainly throughout the Israeli society. Just pray for comfort during this difficult time.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. That is our prayer.